What's up friends, it's Core. Welcome back to another video. Now inside of today's video, we're going to be continuing our series on how to play Pokemon Showdown. This is the intermediate video since the previous one was beginner. So the first one covered basic menu options and basically what is Pokemon. Now this one is going to focus on team building, optimal plays, and what to watch out for and how to play against certain game plans. So let's get into that inside the team builder. Okay, here we are inside the team builder. Now, I put a couple Pokemon in that I think are good examples for our game plans. So do not quote me on a lot of these because I'm still not too good at the game, but this is at least my perception of the Pokemon. So this is Ferrothorn. Now, Ferrothorn, as you can tell by his stats over there, is quite defensive. He has some offensive capabilities, but he focuses mostly on defense. And that's very important for picking what your Pokemon's good at. You don't want to take a Pokemon that has insanely good special attack and put a bunch of physical attacks on it. Unless you want to run a meme set, which is perfectly fine. But Ferrothorn, his most used set involves quite a bit of entry hazards. Now, the moves that I have on Ferrothorn right now are Stealth Rocks and Spikes. Now, these moves, when used, summon entry hazards, meaning whenever your opponent switches Pokemon, they get hurt by these entry hazards. Now, Stealth Rock is a rock type move and Spikes is a ground type move, and they have their weaknesses and super effectivenesses. Now, against low-level players, just spamming Stealth Rocks and Spikes and getting all that damage is pretty broken. When I was playing Gen 7 OU a couple years ago, basically, it was just Stealth Rock after Spike, after Toxic Spike. You just couldn't breathe. So, to play against this, well, the next Pokemon is pretty much the counter to this, since a lot of people don't know that these entry hazards can be deleted pretty much. So let's get into the next Pokemon. Okay, now this is Korver Knight. As you can see, Korver Knight only has one move, which is Defog. Now, Defog's entire purpose is to get rid of entry hazards. So if your opponent puts down some Spikes or some Stealth Rocks, you can switch in a Pokemon that has Defog and blow them all away. Now, Defog isn't the only move that gets rid of entry hazards. There are actually some better ones, like Rapid Spin, and I think that's it. Just Defog and Rapid Spin are the only ones that get rid of it. But if you are inside of OU, most of the time, you're going to have to deal with entry hazards. So, as you could probably see by my team, which I will go to now, most of my teams have either an Excadrill, which has Rapid Spin, or a Korver Knight, which can use Defog. Now, I have not many teams, and as you can see, the names are pretty stupid, but Korver Knight and Excadrill are the main bros for this, but there are other Pokemon which can take advantage of this. So if you're going against someone who really focuses on Spikes, Toxic Spikes, and all that, having a Defogger is very helpful. Alright, the next Pokemon on this counter list is Toxapex. Now, I just thought Toxapex was the optimal Pokemon to showcase this type of playstyle. Now, this isn't like a full Toxapex new meta or just normal meta, but most of the time they're going to be running these kind of moves. So this is known as Toxapex Stall. Toxapex has insanely high special defense and high defense, which means it takes hits very well. And it also is given a variety of very slow-paced moves. So if your opponent goes against this Pokemon, well, pretty much just stall them out. So this Pokemon showcases quite a bit of different strategies. So of course we have the Toxic Spikes, which is just like the Ferrothorn up here. It's an entry hazard. You can put down 3 layers of it, 2 layers of it, and if you put down 2, it can battlely poison the Pokemon. And battlely poisoning makes them die very quickly. And low-level Toxapex players, at least I see, usually run Baneful Bunker, and they poison them, and then they Baneful Bunker to make sure they don't get hit, so they can just stall them out. And it is kind of predictable, especially when they do it over and over again. So if you have a setup mon, which I'll get into later, you can call them on their counter, or protect in this case. So then we have Toxic, which does the exact same thing as Toxic Spikes. It's just it's not an entry hazard. We already talked about how to get rid of the entry hazards, but with Toxic camping, it's actually pretty viable. Toxic does have 80% accuracy or 90, so it does have a chance to miss, but most of the time, if they use Toxic, you're going to get hit by it. Now, Toxic, it can cripple a lot of Pokemon. Now, Toxic, along with another variety of moves, don't really do any damage, but they put a status effect on. So, Toxic poisons, Will-O-Wisp can burn, and Thunder Wave can paralyze, and all those other things. Now, Toxic is quite annoying since it can make your Pokemon die very quickly. Every single turn that you get poisoned, the damage goes up by 2, I think. So it doubles in power every single time. And that is very hard to counter against. If you have a Pokemon that has a bunch of buffs and it's really strong, well, then they're going to die from the Toxic. So how do you play against Toxic? Well, a couple things. You could bait it out and throw out a Pokemon that is immune to being toxic, like a Steel type or a Poison type, because both of those Pokemon cannot be toxic, unless the Pokemon has a certain ability, but that's very niche and not really too practical. But toxic, you kind of just have to hope and pray that you have a Pokemon that can counter it. Clefable has a move called Magic Guard, which makes it so it can't be status effect, which is quite helpful. But Toxapex, it's just an annoying Stallymon, and it can stall you out for a very long time. But it does have counters. Strong ground types, strong electric types, or you could, I don't know, maybe paralyze it and hope you get lucky. And then the final move I have on this Toxapex is Recover. Now, Recover heals, I'm pretty sure, 1/4 of your HP. Now, no, I think it's 1/3. Something like that. Now, usually Toxapexes do have Recover since it's pretty annoying to have to grind down all that HP and then they just recover and, well, you just wasted like 15 minutes clicking the move and doing 2 damage. I had to take care of some cat issues there, but when I was dealing with the cat, I remembered that I forgot to put a certain Pokemon on this little diagram of moves and how to counter them. So continuing off of the whole how to deal with stall, there is a certain move which is very good at dealing with these type of Pokemon. And that move is Taunt. Now, Taunt makes it so the opposing Pokemon can't use any moves that aren't physical damage or just damage in general. So they can't use any buffing moves to themselves. They can't use any debuffing moves. They can't toxic you. They can't poison you. They literally can't do anything but beat you up, which is pretty powerful. If you expect, let's say, Toxapex to go for T-Spikes or Toxic Spikes, you can Taunt, and then the Toxapex pretty much can't do anything but spam Scald, since usually that's a move that it runs. But Taunt is a very powerful move, and to be honest, it can counter most of these sets. The Ferrothorn pretty much get countered. The entirety of Toxapex right now is countered. Now, this is not a really normal Toxapex set, since I was kind of just showing off some of the annoying moves it can have. But still, if this Toxapex did exist, it literally can't do anything. Taunt makes it so it cannot use any of these moves, and it'll have to use Struggle, which does 25% HP each turn, which is kind of funny. But on to the next Pokemon. And here it is, my personal favorite type of Pokemon, the Setup Destruction Pokemon. So the entire purpose of this type of Pokemon is to use a move that makes it really strong, and then since it's relatively fast most of the time, it can just use its strongest moves and take them out really quickly. And I think it's really cool. Now, Weavile is one of my personal favorites since you can just use Focus Sash, you live on 1 HP, you get a Sword Stance off, and then you're able to just spam strong moves. Now, on this particular Weavile set, it is not optimal, since I wanted to just show some other types of sets or some other moves on the Weavile, which is Sword Stance, makes your attack go up. That's pretty normal. Agility is not used on Weavile, since, as you can see down there, speed is a very high stat for Weavile. Fake Out, now, this is just a priority move. Usually Weaviles just run Ice Shard, but Fake Out is very good in doubles, which I'm not going to get into since I'm not good at it. But if you just want pure destruction, you can wall up people with this. But there is a way to take down these dangerous and threatening Pokemon. Now, this is Haze. Haze is a move that's used quite a bit on the tankier Pokemon, but it can be used on quick Pokemon just to get it out. So, as you probably have already guessed, Haze gets rid of stat buffs. So let's say you have a Weavile that's using Agility and Sword Dance. Agility for some reason, but Sword Dance definitely. This Toxapex, it knows that if this Weavile gets enough Sword Stances, even this poor Toxapex, which is so tanky, is going to take a lot of damage. So, this Toxapex has a really smart idea. It just uses Haze, and that gets rid of all buffs. Now, this does include debuffs, but, usually debuffs aren't that important, and if you do have a Haze Pokemon, usually you don't want to use it on a Pokemon with crazy debuffs. But Weavile right here would get shut down by this Toxapex. Well, not this Toxapex. Well, actually it could, since it could Toxic it. But that's not important. This isn't the optimal set. So those are the main gimmicks that I see used a lot. Of course, there are an insane amount of other things, like specific teams that are built around abilities, specific teams that are built around like weather, like maybe even a team that is built around a specific move. Now, I could get into those later, but this is pretty much just the whole team building section. So now let's get into the final section of this video, which is reading your opponent. Now, as you all probably know, each individual Pokemon has 1 or 2 types along with them. So a Pokemon like Tyranitar over here is a dark and a rock type, meaning that he's weak to certain Pokemon types. Now, usually you want your team to have possible defense measures against people just using one specific type. So if you had a full team that's really weak to fighting types, well, if you go against a fighting type Pokemon, you're going to struggle. But that's why certain Pokemon go very well together. One of my favorites is Toxapex and Appletun, since they complement each other's weaknesses very well. You don't want a team that's too predictable. Let's say you have a Pokemon that's really weak to Earthquake. You probably want a flying type Pokemon, since flying is immune to ground. There are plenty of different teams, and I would highly advise to just look around and see what kind of team fits your playstyle. But now, I'm going to go inside of a battle and show you some reads. Hopefully. Or maybe I'll just suck. Okay, so here's our battle against Pedro Pete. Now, I'm not going to try to win this battle. Well, I'll probably try to win it, but I'll do it off camera. Now, I want to make sure that I can get some good footage for this. So let's do that. I'm just going to start with a Pokemon that I think would be good. I think he's going to start with Whimsicott, so I'm going to start with Tyranitar. Now, I'm going to show you some switches right now. So he went for Grapple Lock. So what you could do right now is just stay in, but most likely you're going to get beat up by a very strong fighting type move. So switching would probably be the best play. And I, personally, am going to switch into my Toxapex, since it's probably not going to take too much damage from this Octolock move, which I have not seen Grapple Lock used, but it's a move. Now, if he did use a fighting type move, we would have taken a lot less damage. Now, he might switch into his Korver Knight expecting a Toxic, but I'm going to Toxic Spike. So he Brutal Swings, which does not do too much damage. Alright, so I'm expecting him to go for another brutal swing. Oh, okay, so I did not know that Octolock traps you in, but that's perfectly fine. We can just get our toxic spikes up and probably just die. So I think the best thing that we can do against this very slow Pokemon is just go for a toxic. Okay, so we died, but that's perfectly fine, because since we have Grapplock here, well, again, this is low ladder, meaning that the people that we're going against does not have the highest amount of points. I'm not insulting him, I'm just making an assessment. So on his part, I would highly advise him to go into a Pokemon that resists flying, but he could have a move that's super effective on my Togekiss, being Iron Punch or Bullet Punch or something. Now, that's perfectly fine, but since I'm faster than him, I'm going to go for a Nasty Plot, and he goes into the Korver Knight. So since Korver Knight is fairly slow, I think he's going to go for the Defog first, so I'm going to go for the Substitute. Maybe he'll just go for the Iron Head first, but if I want to, I can switch into a different Pokemon. So he defogs first, which is smart on his part. So I already showed you guys what defog does, so I put up all those entry hazards, which would badly poison all of his Pokemon, but his Korver Knight was able to do what I said Korver Knights usually do. So since Togekiss has the ability, which is Serene Grace, and also has Air Slash, there's a very high chance to flinch the opponent. Now, Air Slash does have a chance to miss, which is a 5% chance, which unfortunately we were gifted with, but we were able to flinch him. So Togekiss with Nasty Plot is quite strong, and we should be able to do some pretty decent damage to his entire team. So it was forfeited since he does not have many Pokemon to go against it, but I think he still could have won. But that was a pretty good example. I showed you guys how to switch out, and I showed you guys, well, the Korver Knight doing its thing. So I'm gonna go back to the homepage. Alright, so inside this video, I taught you guys quite a bit about team building. It's far from perfect. It was not a very in-depth video, but inside the comments below, please tell me if I missed anything, and I'll make a follow-up video to make sure that I get everything down. Because this is a video series that I want to put down for people who want to get into Pokemon Showdown and learn how to play it. Now, I know I'm not a really good teacher, and my video probably didn't teach you that much, but at least it probably taught you if you're a mid-level player, since I have a bad habit of talking like everyone knows what I'm talking about. But it doesn't matter, because the next video is pretty much specifically made for advanced players. Now, this is something that I've actually been doing, just trying to find a lot of resources to get better at the game, and that's the topic of the next video. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching, keep on lookout for my videos, and I'll see you next time.